Hello everybody and welcome to Filmoria, and this is our spoiler talk of Rogue One, A Star Wars Story. So if you haven't seen the movie, stay away.
Stop.
This is dangerous territory. But if you have, stay with us. We're going to talk so much about this movie. I'm Chris Haydon.
I'm James Thompson.
I'm Scott Allden.
Let's talk Rogue One, boys.
So what do we reckon? General thoughts on the film?
This movie is amazing.
I'll let you go first.
This movie is astonishing. I mean, you know, it's got everything you would want from a Star Wars film, but ultimately it's just a fantastic film, isn't it? It's just a really bombastic and entertaining movie, and I love how singular it is, the fact that it's inside a franchise that's very established, very well loved, but it's trying something new and something different. And for me, that's really exciting, you know?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, echo basically a lot what you said, but I think the main thing is that it does still feel like a Star Wars film, but it's not so much involved with all the things that we know. And then you have the battle scenes, you know, the ground warfare on Scarif and on Jeddah, which you feel more immersed in that universe because we've not really seen that sort of very sort of personal sort of look at the Star Wars universe and its characters. So that's what I like the most about it. It just really puts you at the heart of what's going on.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, I mean, for me, I think out of the three of us, I was probably the more kind of not as excited. I was still excited, but I was kind of approaching it with a bit of caution, and it blew me away. I mean, I think considering it's a Star Wars film and you kind of know what you're going to get with a Star Wars film, it surprised me a lot.
Yeah.
And I didn't expect that at all. I thought it would be quite very similar to Force Awakens in the fact that there's going to be some throwbacks and that kind of thing. Whereas, you know, like you guys said, it's very much as much a warfare film as it is an actual Star Wars film.
Yeah.
There were some nice kind of hints at like callbacks to the other films and that kind of thing, but the very fact that it's a gradual kind of build the characters and then you're in like an all-scale war.
Yeah.
It's like a sci-fi Saving Private Ryan in a way, with a battle on the beaches and that kind of thing.
Yeah,
so
it really is.
And I thought the way that it was structured, it was inch perfect, and the way it concluded I thought was great. And I think generally it surprised me, which I really just didn't think that was going to be the case whatsoever. So, you know, great job, I think, from all involved, really.
I mean, just to exactly say what you guys just said, like, what Gareth Edwards has been able to do with something that, you know, we all know what happens. So for that narrative to come across in a way that's really tense and really exciting, and, you know, as Scott has said before when we've been talking, that the film has a real urgency about it. You know, when the stuff is going down, like, these guys are on the clock. They've got to get this mission completed. They're, you know, against an enemy that is just relentless and so much stronger, and you get really caught up in the drama, in the way that it's all established. You're just sitting there like, oh, this is so good.
Exactly, and you know, Scott used the right word, immersive. You're in there, you're involved with these characters. You're really kind of willing them on, even against everything that they've got against, like, coming their way.
And because I think as well, because they're all so massively out of their depth, and they're just, you know, they're thrown into this scenario where it's just the odds are titanic. You feel really like a part of it, don't you? You feel like one of those helpless soldiers on the beach, and there's blasters going off, and there's bombs flying, and there's frigging U-wings zooming around, and you just sit there and just kind of overwhelmed by this spectacle, but also the power of the characterization, the storytelling, the emotion. And for me, that's a really important thing, because it's all well and good having a really good action set piece, but if you can maintain a really quality action set piece with characterization, with drama, and actually keep people feeling attached to that story, you've hit a home run, do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And I think Gareth Edwards has done a fantastic job, like, given the circumstances of what he's got to work with.
So obviously Star Wars films, well, at least the modern ones, there's a lot of sort of secrecy about what happens in terms of, you know, reveals and characters that we don't know are in there. I want to talk about the ending. Obviously Darth Vader.
That ending, though.
Yeah. Obviously stuff happens with him through the film, you know, not a lot. You know, we see him a few times talk with Krennic, but then towards the end of the film, you know, it kind of segues very pretty much straight into A New Hope.
Yeah.
What do you think about those final moments involving Vader?
They're just like really nightmarish, aren't they? They're genuinely quite scary. It's
Quite intimidating.
It is. You've got these helpless just people just like trapped in this tiny little like corridor with this force who's just, no pun intended, who is just gonna destroy them, and you're just sitting there like, oh my god. And I think the thing with the movie as well is because it's so reserved with the lack of the Force, the lack of the Jedi, and all that sort of stuff. When that red lightsaber comes out, you're like, oh, okay, right.
It's literally like the money shot.
Yeah, it's like it's coming.
It's kind of like that should kind of like on the you know when they name the scenes in like a DVD, it should be called like Vader's moment.
Yeah,
Something like that. It's like like OMG moment.
Yeah.
Literally, because
but it is one of those moments, and
it just comes out of nowhere, doesn't it?
Yeah, it does.
That's the thing.
And what I love so much about not just that moment, but actually about the sort of the final 15 minutes of the movie, is, you know, this sort of fairly triumphant thing does kind of happen, and it's still like, you haven't won? Come on now. You know, and like this movie, this massive like multi-million blockbuster ends on like pretty horrible note, doesn't it? Really, like all things considered.
Like you think you've got away, but you're really
You've got 3 more films to go.
Yeah, and it does the perfect thing as well, because obviously when you first meet Darth Vader in A New Hope, he's obviously, you know, everyone's terrified of him. And you know, we've only known him for like 5 minutes, so we're like, what's so scary about him? He's a guy in a bin liner. But when you see that scene, and that scene is what happens to get him to that position in New Hope, you're like, yeah, I'd be scared of that dude. He's intense.
Yeah, it's kind of, he just essentially just murders a lot of helpless rebel soldiers.
He just does.
You know, he just chops through them, he pushes them up on the ceiling. It just, and with the lighting as well, it kind of starts like, you know, there's no lighting, it's flickers on and off, and he's seeing the lightsaber like lights up.
Ignites the set, doesn't
That's it, yeah. And it's just like and then the music cue just kind of like enhances that even more, the terror, the dread, and they kind of made Darth Vader kind of scary in a weird way, because with like Revenge of the Sith, you know, it's kind of, you know, laughable, you know, it's I don't know if that's general consensus, but
I think that's probably the planet's consensus.
Yeah. And also with Return of the Jedi, people did say that he was kind of softened because of his sort of reveal as you know, as being Luke's father in Empire.
Yeah.
So this kind of not reinvented him, but it kind of re-established him as like a real, again, for want of a better word, like, you know, force to be reckoned with, you know, as an antagonist in the film. So in terms of, you know, how to end a film, especially on this sort of scale, I thought it was perfect, because then it just led into literally the start of A New Hope.
Yeah.
Literally minutes before.
It just packs such a punch, doesn't it?
Yeah.
The whole movie is just rugged and visceral and tense, and the action is just sweaty and hard hitting, isn't it? You know, the bullets are flying. You feel the intensity of it, and for the movie to end in that kind of way, you know, we were talking prior to this video that although, you know, Star Wars always has conflict, always has battles and that sort of stuff, you always have a sense that the good guys are going to prevail in some sort of way, because there's always a clean divide between who's good and who's bad. But in Rogue One, I mean, even the good guys are anti-heroes, really, aren't they? They're sort of criminals and traitors and defectors and all this sort of stuff.
I mean, they're rogues.
They are.
They're lovable rogues.
They literally are.
You know, it's... I mean, just quickly going back to that Vader scene, I mean, it reminded me a lot of Alien.
Yeah.
That whole claustrophobic feel about it, and it's like you say, the lighting, and just how visceral it was, and you kind of like, oh, you know, shit.
It's ugly, and I mean they die in some inventive ways. There's people, like I said, there's some guy on the ceiling who then gets like slit open, and God knows what. I mean, the body count in that film must be immense, mustn't it?
Like 2 planets worth of humans.
Extinction of the human race.
I mean, like you say about the characters. What do we think about the characters and the way that they were handled, and essentially how they died? I mean,
well, yeah, I think you know, like a lot of people have with The Force Awakens, you're introducing people to an awful lot of new characters. But I think with this movie, it doesn't even have the security blanket of leaning on the saga stuff. It doesn't even have the...
It's like clean slate.
Yeah, it doesn't have the kind of commodities that are expendable in Star Wars. So you're basically introducing us to people. They're people. You know, Jyn is a person, and Baze is a person, and Chirrut is a person. And, you know, they're not all different creatures and different species and different races. They're just a gaggle of people who get shoved together by means, and they must go and take on this massively arduous task. And I think that that boots on the ground feel that the characters have is massively reflective for the audience, because you really side with Jyn, you really side with Chirrut, you really even side with K2SO, this ridiculously massive droid. You know, these characters, they have a sense of humanity that I think is surprising, like how empowering it is, particularly the scenes between Chirrut and Baze. You know, these two sort of, you know, heavy-handed dudes. One of them's a blind monk and the other one just shoots people for a living. But they've got this weird sort of like brotherly connection.
It's a really nice connection, and it as the film goes on more and more, you feel more connected to them, and obviously the last moments that they have together. I mean, I got a lump in the throat because I thought it was really quite a nice, powerful, and you could see the respect between them, because at first, you know, you've got like, you know, one of them's all about the Force, and the other one's kind of like, well,
what are you talking about, mate?
And then literally in that last scene, it transfers over, and it's a really, quite a poignant scene, actually.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah, in the midst of all this carnage and chaos, and I think with regards to the whole of the team, you think each one of them has a proper purpose. You know, there's not one character in there just for the sake of being, you know, you could have had like a blind monk in there just for the sake of he's awesome.
Yeah.
You know, but it's not. They all have a purpose. You know, you don't have just like a character that's just there for comedy value or anything like that. They all play out really well as part of the story.
Yeah,
and
definitely.
like you say, as part of, you know, there's a bit of conflict between them all, and yet they're still banding together and they're on the mission, and and you feel some connection to all of them rather than just say Jyn and maybe one other.
Yeah.
You know, at the end of the day, you know, these films are built on the characters and how much they're going to be iconic and that kind of thing. And I think Rogue One features a lot of iconic characters.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah.
And I think as well, it's not just how well these characters become fleshed out and rendered as the movie progresses, but they're all introduced in such interesting ways. Like, none of them arrive on screen in the same manner.
No.
They're all in different places, they're all in different locations, they're all under different sort of influences. Like, the introduction, I think, out of all of them, one of the best ones is the introduction of Cassian. You know, so you see him and you're like, oh, here he is, he's the lovable rogue guy, he's really cool. And then he kills someone, you're like, oh, alright.
Yeah.
Like, I'm supposed to root for you and you just murdered some dude in like a minute. Like moments like that make you realise that it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter whether you're good, bad, or indifferent. You're in an environment where it's kill or be killed.
Yeah.
And I think the film establishes that so well. And I think the characters and the way that they're built into that environment, that resonates fantastically. You know, you've got people like Jyn, who's obviously, you know, the main and pretty much the single female figure in the core cast, and you know, she's very world weary, she's very streetwise and strong. And then you've got people like Cassian, who's, you know, he's very practical in his approach to stuff, isn't he? He's very organised, he's got orders. And as you said, the conflict between these characters, the way they sort of smash and crash together, it's nice. They shouldn't all gel together. What do you think on that?
Yeah, it's kind of like they don't have like a common interest, but they have interests that will kind of benefit each other in some form, you know. It's interesting when you raise the point about Baze and Chirrut. Like, I really like them as characters. They kind of reminded me sort of like the C-3PO and R2 of the film. Yeah,
definitely.
You know, they had that sort of little banter going on between them, but there was always that kind of, that knowing respect between one another. And then, like, on the other hand, you had like Andor and K2, who were kind of like the Chewie and the Han Solo, but they weren't like explicitly exactly like those two. They didn't remind you of them, but they just kind of fit that particular part of the puzzle. But as I say, no one was really kind of like thrown into it, and like they kind of all wanted the same thing. It was kind of like just matters of convenience that they kind of did find a similar sort of common goal.
They sort of they band together because to make and complete a cause which they all think is worth fighting for, don't they?
Exactly.
They might arrive at that, idea in different ways, but ultimately the end product is we need to get the Death Star plans upon Scarif, and how they do that is, Chirrut is one with the Force, he can knock people out with his stick, and then Baze will shoot loads of people, and Jyn will climb up a building. But at the end of the day, they're all striving to get that one thing.
Yeah.
And yeah, I just think it's so well characterised. I think they've paid such a rich attention to these characters, and considering there's been all this stuff about rewrites and bringing on Tony Gilroy,
you wouldn't have thought
you wouldn't know.
there was any rewrites whatsoever.
Yeah,
it feels like a very fluid film. It feels like they knew exactly what they were doing with the story, exactly what they were doing with the characters.
Yeah.
It just feels like a complete film.
It does. It's got a real sense of coordination. It's got a real sense of structure, and the narrative building, particularly in the first hour, where they're really establishing drama, they're establishing location. We're seeing the rebellion build. We're seeing the Empire prep the Death Star. We're seeing all of this stuff, all the things going on with Jin's father Galen and all that sort of stuff. Which then, when you get to Scarif and it just goes bollock mental, it's all right because
it feels justified.
It's built to that massive climax, and like that climax is just insane. That. Personally, for me, I think that final hour of the movie is the most exciting thing I've seen in a blockbuster all year. Yeah. It's the film that I've sat in the cinema and been, wow. Every moment, you're like, it's getting better. It's progressively getting more exciting and more intense.
And there's a lot of twists and shocks
Yeah.
in that hour as well.
Mm-hmm.
We know that these characters are likely going to die, but the way in which they're dispatched is really clever.
Yes.
and like we said off camera before, like Bodhi, the way he's just got rid of, you're kind of like, whoa.
And it comes just after a main moment.
Yeah.
So he just achieved something and bang, you're dead.
It's just like, oh my god, did that just happen?
Yeah.
And that's what we want as an audience. We want to be surprised by it, especially for like a film like this.
Yeah,
that
definitely.
Is in a massive franchise where we've seen a hell of a lot of the same kind of stuff from prequels.
Before. We have there's an idea of what to expect, because they're kind of in a way they're quite like James Bond films. They've got a sense of an identity.
It's tradition, isn't it?
There's certain things they adhere to, isn't there? And there's certain ways that consequently that will consume them.
Yeah.
And I like the fact that in the restrained manner of Rogue One, it takes away a lot of those things. It's like, all right, we can't use that for whatever purpose, for narrative purpose, whatever. Instead, we're going to enhance this. And the way they do that, as you said, like, these characters are doomed. Once upon Scarif, when this shield gate closes, they are literally sitting ducks. They're just waiting for death. And death comes in a variety of ways. Most of them are pretty damn poignant. But although we're likely not going to see these characters again, they've got a massively lasting impact upon the spectator, and as you said, quite rightly, upon the huge range of Star Wars characters. Like, for me, I think K2SO is one of the best droids. I think he's a fantastic droid.
Very well characterised.
Just brilliant, absolutely brilliant, And even people like, characters like Chirrut, as you said, he could just be there because he's Donnie Yen and he can do some really cool kung fu.
He could just be the awesome.
Yeah,
awesome
he could just be the Jackie Chan in every Jackie Chan movie.
The Asian demographic guy.
Yeah, but he's not. They do a lot with him, and they give him texture, they give him humour. As James said off camera, there's a wonderful scene where he gets a hood shoved on his head, and he's like, "I'm blind," and little moments like that. But they pay dividends to when you're building.
And you remember them.
Yeah, exactly right. Yeah. So, talking of characters then. Out of the people who appeared in it, so there's a few people who appear. We've got Bail Organa, we've got Grand Moff Tarkin, Princess Leia. Out of all of these sort of characters, from the previous saga movies, what was the one that surprised you the most, or the one that you resonated with the most?
The one that surprised me the most, not because I didn't suspect it, but just on his general appearance in the film, was Tarkin. And I think we could kind of agree on that on some kind of level.
There's this, Peter Cushing is back from the dead, and they did a damn good job with it. Considering.
The CGI is absolutely flawless. We saw the press screening at the IMAX, and it was, for me, it was a little bit jarring, but on the 2D showing, it looked a lot more refined and a lot more realistic.
Yeah, because I have to admit, where we were sat for the IMAX screening, we were probably just a little bit too close.
Yeah.
Just marginally too close.
Yeah.
You know, but when you're a little bit further back, just...
Yeah, did it kind of look a bit like CGI Patrick Stewart in X-Men Last Stand? That kind of
not
that bad.
I say, even in the IMAX, I thought it looked really good.
It did look great,
But what I think is so... what is so clever about the Peter Cushing CG work in this movie is not just the face. It's everything. It's everything. It's the structure. It's the voice. Yeah, like he's got a very particular voice, you know. And the way that he stands in frame, like you think about you think of Ben Mendelsohn. He's probably talking to a box.
Yeah.
He's probably talking to a tennis ball on a stick, and that tennis ball on a stick is seriously intimidating. And you know, and I like as well what they've similarly did with Kylo Ren in The Force Awakens is they've made a villain who is flawed and to an extent is a bit of a pawn, isn't he?
Yeah.
And I like the fact that the intensity of the Grand Moff Tarkin character over Krennic.
Yeah.
And you believe that. You don't ever think, it's Ben Mendelsohn talking to a stick. You
believe
that's a person
You feel
there.
that there's two people talking to each other and one is genuinely intimidated by the other and being used by the other. I mean, the visuals are just incredible.
They are.
I kind of half expected him to be in it because of it makes sense.
The time,
but I really didn't expect him to A, be in it as much as he is in it, and B, him to just be like the real guy. I mean, it's just...
I mean, he's the villain,
He's
really.
a supporting character. He's not a cameo by any stretch.
No, I mean, we're you know, the scenes on Scarif fill you with awe and, you know, they're really impressive. But I think the most impressive thing is how he's CGI rendered. And I just think...
Yeah, I mean, it's amazing. Like, it deserves technical Oscars.
and especially like in this day and age when we're so used to CGI and things looking absolutely stunning on screen, for that to kind of be like, wow, that looks impressive.
You know, you're making a ghost. You're bringing somebody back to life.
The voice work.
It's just
There wasn't one moment that I kind of thought that's a soundbite or anything like that. It felt fluid and it felt like the real guy was there being filmed, which, you know, hats off. That's crazy.
So impressive.
Obviously, the performer, I think, had to have studied Peter Cushing in a lot of his work, not just obviously Star Wars, but I think just in his, you know, like Sherlock Holmes or the Hammer stuff which he did, he's famous for. You know, I can see that there's very, very meticulous sort of studying that went into it to kind of articulate those like really sort of intricate details of his voice. It's something I picked up on, you know, on the first screening. Just like his inflections, it's really sort of noticeable. There's a lot of nuance, isn't there? Even though this is a digital character, as you said, there's an awful lot of traits of the man as much as the character. Yeah.
And I think that shows the level of detail that the animators and the photographers and the directors and all the people who work on these sort of films are willing to put into these projects, you know. Yeah. And you mentioned about the actual visuals of the film. I mean, the cinematography is amazing.
Yeah, it's incredible.
And the visual effects in terms of the CG, but, you know, the practical effects in this movie, the set design, the sound design. I mean, like, there's moments in the movie that just, in terms of their actual, like, technical prowess, are just amazing. Like, one of the ones that stands out for me is a really small moment, but it's when Jyn is trying to get over to her father, Galen. He's laying on a platform and it's pouring with rain, and Krennic's shuttle flies away and it pushes her back, and the intensity of that airflow shoving her all the way down that platform. You believe that. It looks like a ragdoll is flying down, you know, and moments like that, you know, you can't do that with CG. No. That sort of stuff has to be done. Like, you look at a movie like Inception, when they're in that corridor, if that was with CG, that would look nowhere near as good as that scene looks, because they actually spent the time building the set and actually putting people in that environment. And I mean, some of the scenes on the planet Edu, like in that pouring rain, just look banging. I mean, it must have been a nightmare to piss and shoot, but it looks great. Like, the payoff's worth it.
Yeah.
And just Scarif is just
mind blowing.
Yes, like Scarif in itself almost feels like an own movie.
Yeah.
It feels like its own thing, and but as we said, the way that it gets to that payoff is just so rich and rewarding, and it's such an impressive film, isn't it? Just such an impressive film, both technically and thematically.
Yeah. So to finish off, a couple of words. What do you think of Rogue One?
What do you think?
I'll say surprisingly unique.
Nice, like it.
I'll say what blockbuster entertainment should be.
Cool. And I'm going to finish off and say I want to see it again now.
Definitely.
Yeah,
Can't
concur.
We can't argue with that one. So thanks guys for watching. Make sure you check out Chris's Rogue One review on the website filmoria.co.uk, and we'll see you again very soon.